The call reached Benjamin Sullivan 4 minutes before he was expected to stand beneath the lights of his company's Christmas charity gala and promised that no child in New York would face the holidays alone. Beyond the glass doors of his office, reporters rehearsed introductions, employees carried wrapped gifts toward the lobby, and a children's choir waited beside a stage decorated with silver branches and white roses. Benjamin had already lifted the folder containing his speech when his private phone displayed a hospital number that had somehow bypassed every layer of executive security surrounding him. The woman identified herself as Rachel Morris from Saint Gabriel Medical Center, verified his full legal name, then informed him that Amara Johnson had named him temporary guardian of an 8-year-old boy if she became unable to make medical decisions after emergency heart surgery. Benjamin remained standing, although the room seemed to tilt beneath him, because Amara had vanished from his life on Christmas Eve 8 years earlier and had never once contacted him afterward. Before he could ask whether the child was his, Rachel explained that Amara had prohibited the hospital from answering that question until Benjamin opened a sealed statement in her presence. Then she added one detail that transformed confusion into dread. Amara had scheduled this disclosure weeks before her collapse, which meant the truth was not arriving because she expected to die, but because she had finally chosen to live with what followed. Benjamin asked for the hospital address, ended the call, and stared through the windows while snow drifted across Manhattan with the deceptive calm of a world untouched by private catastrophe. His executive assistant, Emily Carter, entered carrying the final event schedule and immediately stopped when she saw the expression he usually concealed even during lawsuits, mergers, and public investigations. Benjamin told her that Daniel Mercer would deliver the keynote. The board would receive no details beyond a family emergency, and every reporter would be kept away from Saint Gabriel until he understood what was happening. Emily did not question the order, although she knew his unexplained departure would provoke financial speculation before the choir finished its first song. Benjamin reached for his coat, then opened the bottom drawer of his desk, where a velvet ring box rested beneath archived contracts he had not touched in months. He had planned to propose to Amara the night she left, but instead she returned the apartment key, asked him not to follow her, and disappeared into the snow while he stood beside an unfinished Christmas tree. He placed the ring in his pocket, not because he imagined proposing again, but because whatever awaited him belonged to the same future that had been interrupted before either of them understood the cost. During the drive to Brooklyn, Benjamin replayed their final year without allowing success to excuse the details he had once dismissed as temporary. Sullivan Technologies had been struggling to secure the investment that later transformed it into a global company, and Benjamin had treated every hour away from work as a risk to thousands of employees. Amara was caring for her widowed father and 15-year-old sister while directing neighborhood housing projects, yet Benjamin had mistaken her ability to endure pressure for proof that she needed nothing from him. Whenever she asked whether ambition could become another form of abandonment, he answered by describing the home they would buy after the company stabilized. The company never stabilized, because survival became expansion, expansion became dominance, and every completed goal merely created a more respectable reason to remain unavailable. On their last evening, Amara had asked whether he would recognize a life worth protecting before it disappeared, and Benjamin had replied that everything he built was meant for them. He now understood that she had not questioned his intentions. She had questioned whether intentions without presence could still be called love. Saint Gabriel Medical Center occupied a renovated brick building beside a small church, far from the private Manhattan institutions preferred by Benjamin's board. Rachel Morris met him near reception and explained that Amara had collapsed while inspecting an apartment building scheduled for community renovation. Doctors discovered a congenital weakness near one of the major vessels connected to her heart, a condition that had remained hidden until years of exhaustion and untreated symptoms made immediate surgery necessary. The operation carried a strong likelihood of success, but complications remained serious enough that the hospital required a confirmed guardian for the child listed as her dependent. Benjamin asked again whether Noah Johnson was his son, and Rachel said the answer existed inside documents Amara had ordered them not to release without her consent. She handed him a sealed hospital envelope containing a temporary guardianship form, then directed him toward a family lounge where Noah waited with a social worker. Benjamin noticed that his own name appeared not as a possible contact, but as the first choice Amara had written 6 years earlier and never replaced. Noah sat beside a wide window, repairing a wooden bridge with patient concentration, his elbows balanced on the table, while snow gathered along the courtyard railings outside. He had Amara's warm brown eyes, although the crease between his eyebrows and the precise way he aligned every piece felt disturbingly familiar to Benjamin. When the boy stood, he neither rushed forward nor retreated, which suggested Amara had prepared him without teaching him what emotion to perform. Noah introduced himself politely, then asked whether Benjamin had really designed emergency computer systems used by hospitals during winter storms. Benjamin answered that his company had built part of the network, although he had never expected it to carry a message capable of dividing his life into before and after. Noah said his mother kept one photograph of Benjamin inside a book she opened every Christmas, but she never described him as a hero, a villain, or a stranger. She only said that adults sometimes called fear a sacrifice when they were too frightened to admit they had taken away another person's choice. Benjamin accepted the photograph Noah offered, recognizing himself and Amara beside a neighborhood garden they had helped restore during the first year of their relationship. On the back, Amara had written that strong roots could survive underground for years, although survival alone did not guarantee that anything would grow again. Benjamin opened the hospital envelope and found a notarized guardianship form, instructions for Noah's school and medical care, and one handwritten sentence beneath Amara's signature. Biology would be confirmed after the truth was spoken, but responsibility had already begun the moment Benjamin chose whether to remain. Before he could ask Noah what he understood, Dr. Michael Harris appeared in the doorway and informed him that Amara was awake, frightened, and refusing additional medication until she knew he had arrived. Noah placed the unfinished bridge in Benjamin's hands and asked him not to promise anything before hearing everything, because promises made too early usually protected the person speaking more than the person receiving them. Benjamin carried the bridge into the corridor, aware that one careless movement could break something another person had spent years trying to hold together. Dr. Harris walked beside Benjamin through a quieter wing of the hospital, explaining that Amara's condition was inherited, difficult to detect without specialized imaging, and likely responsible for years of fatigue she had attributed to work and single parenthood. Her surgery had been advanced after new tests revealed dangerous pressure near the weakened vessel, although her medical team remained cautiously optimistic about recovery. Benjamin asked why Amara had chosen Christmas morning, expecting an answer shaped by sentiment. But the doctor said she had scheduled a legal meeting that afternoon to disclose Noah's parentage and revise the guardianship arrangements. Her collapse had not created the truth. It had only accelerated a decision she had already made while expecting to survive its consequences. That distinction unsettled Benjamin more than a farewell letter would have, because it meant Amara had finally chosen honesty without using illness as a shield. Dr. Harris stopped outside her room and warned him that she did not want sympathy, rescue, or immediate forgiveness, only the chance to explain what she had done and what others had done afterward. Amara sat upright near the window beneath a pale blue blanket, looking older than the woman Benjamin remembered, yet unmistakably herself in the steady way she met his gaze. Neither of them moved toward an embrace, because 8 years of silence could not be crossed honestly through one dramatic gesture. Her attention shifted toward the wooden bridge, and she smiled faintly when Benjamin admitted that Noah had entrusted it to him without providing repair instructions. Amara said the boy believed broken structures should be examined before they were reinforced. Otherwise, people often strengthened the same flaw that caused the collapse. The remark carried enough warmth to prevent cruelty and enough truth to prevent comfort, which reminded Benjamin why conversations with her had once made him feel exposed without feeling diminished. He placed the bridge beside her bed, then asked the question he had carried from the family lounge. Amara answered that Noah was his son without hesitation, softening or asking him to sit down first. The certainty landed more violently than accusation, because Benjamin had spent 8 years grieving a relationship while an entire childhood developed beyond his knowledge. He asked whether she had ever intended to tell him, and Amara opened a locked document case containing copies of letters, courier receipts, legal notes, and an email chain printed from an archived account. She had sent the first letter 6 weeks after Noah's birth, the second when her father died, and the third before Noah entered kindergarten. Each letter had been addressed to Benjamin's executive office because his personal residence had changed, while the email went to a private account once reserved for urgent matters. Benjamin recognized the address immediately and remembered that Daniel Mercer's office had controlled it during the company's expansion crisis. He said Daniel would never conceal something so important, but Amara refused to accuse him without evidence. The records proved that every message entered Sullivan Technologies, yet none reached Benjamin's personal files, leaving open the question of whether the failure came from one man, a security system, or a culture Benjamin himself had built. Amara admitted that her original decision to leave had still been entirely her own, and she would not disguise that mistake behind intercepted correspondence. She discovered her pregnancy 2 days after learning that her father's health was deteriorating and her younger sister Lena would soon require a legal guardian. Benjamin was preparing to sign an investment agreement containing personal guarantees that could have destroyed him financially if he withdrew during the final negotiations. Amara believed revealing a pregnancy, a dying parent, and a dependent teenager would compel him to abandon the agreement, because loyalty had always been his strongest instinct when someone he loved appeared vulnerable. Instead of trusting him with the decision, she left for Philadelphia, where an aunt could help care for Lena, while Amara completed the pregnancy and arranged her father's treatment. She intended to contact Benjamin after the investment closed, but shame grew stronger each month she remained silent. When her first letter received no response, she interpreted his silence as the answer she feared yet believed she deserved. Benjamin told her that fear did not excuse deciding whether he could become a father, and Amara accepted the accusation without asking him to reduce its weight. She had watched his success from a distance and convinced herself that every achievement proved he had escaped burdens she would have placed upon him. When Noah began asking questions, she refused to invent a death, betrayal, or heroic excuse. So she described Benjamin through ordinary memories while admitting that adults had made choices Noah would judge when he was older. She had not requested money because her nonprofit salary, family support, and a small inheritance provided enough stability, although they never provided certainty. Benjamin asked why she waited until Noah turned 8, and Amara said the timing belonged partly to the child. 6 months earlier, Noah had found one of the returned envelopes and asked whether silence became a lie when it prevented someone from knowing him. That question forced Amara to confront what she had avoided, but before contacting Benjamin, she wanted proof that his silence had actually been chosen. Her attorney obtained archived delivery records and discovered that every message carried the same internal routing code, identifying an executive protection protocol created during the company's first hostile acquisition. Benjamin recognized the code as Daniel Mercer's system, designed to block threats, extortion attempts, and personal communications considered potential leverage against him. Amara warned him not to decide Daniel's guilt before hearing an explanation, because the system proved interception but not motive. She then handed him a sealed flash drive containing a recording made after a private meeting she had never told him occurred. Dr. Harris entered and announced that surgery would begin within the hour, leaving only minutes before nurses prepared her. Amara asked Benjamin to open the drive with Daniel present, because the recording would reveal whether 8 years of silence had been caused by one frightened woman, one protective executive, or a system Benjamin rewarded for treating human vulnerability as danger. Benjamin wanted to remain beside Amara until the nurses arrived, but she insisted that Noah needed someone who would not hide fear behind medical language or legal authority. Before he left, she asked him to make only one promise, that whatever he discovered about Daniel would not become an excuse to avoid examining his own absence before she disappeared. Benjamin understood why she demanded that boundary, because outrage offered a cleaner emotion than regret and could easily transform him into the only injured person in a story where several people had been injured. He told her he would return before surgery began, then carried the sealed flash drive back toward the family lounge. Noah had completed one side of the bridge while waiting, using a straightened paperclip to support a joint where the wooden brace had cracked. When Benjamin praised the solution, Noah said temporary repairs were useful only when everybody remembered they were temporary. The comment sounded like Amara, yet the boy delivered it without performance, as though practical wisdom had simply become part of the language spoken in their home. Emily called before Benjamin could reach Daniel, warning that his canceled keynote had already triggered speculation about illness, scandal, and instability among several board members. Benjamin instructed her to release a brief statement confirming a private family emergency, then asked whether Daniel had left the company event. Emily said Daniel completed the speech, redirected reporters, and was reviewing security logs after learning which hospital had called. Benjamin ordered her to send Daniel alone, without attorneys or corporate security, and to preserve every record connected to Amara Johnson before anyone received permission to alter the archive. A long silence followed before Emily admitted that Daniel had asked about Amara 6 years earlier, after finding an old courier receipt during an office relocation. She assumed he was reviewing a potential threat because Daniel said the sender had already been investigated and cleared. Benjamin felt anger rise, but Amara's warning remained stronger than the desire for immediate judgment. Daniel arrived 40 minutes later, wearing the same dark suit he had used on stage, although the confidence visible during broadcasts had been replaced by exhausted caution. He greeted Noah respectfully, then stopped when he recognized Amara's handwriting on the sealed evidence bag containing the flash drive. Benjamin asked whether Daniel knew the boy's identity, and Daniel admitted that he had suspected the possibility for years without possessing confirmation. The answer nearly ended Benjamin's promise to listen, yet Noah remained close enough to witness every adult choice made in response to pain. Benjamin moved the conversation into a private consultation office, spread the archived delivery records across the table, and asked Daniel to explain the routing codes. Daniel studied them briefly before saying he had authorized the first interception personally and allowed the security system to block later messages automatically. He did not deny responsibility, but insisted that his original decision had not been motivated by scandal, prejudice, or financial gain. 8 years earlier, Sullivan Technologies had faced a coordinated extortion campaign involving fabricated pregnancies, forged medical documents, and threats against Benjamin's family. The board hired investigators who treated every unexpected personal communication as a possible attack, and Amara's first letter arrived without a familiar return address from a city where Benjamin had no known connections. Daniel opened it under the emergency protocol and discovered references to a child, Lena's guardianship, and Amara's fear that Benjamin might abandon the investment agreement. Instead of forwarding the letter, he contacted Amara through the courier service and requested a private meeting, believing someone could be using her identity. Amara came to New York, showed him Noah's birth certificate, and refused Daniel's proposal to arrange a secret paternity test. Daniel then made the decision he had justified for 8 years, telling her that Benjamin was days from signing guarantees affecting thousands of employees and might destroy the company if forced to choose immediately. Benjamin asked whether Daniel understood that his role was to protect him from fraud, not from fatherhood, and Daniel said he understood now because self-deception had finally lost every respectable name. He asked Amara to wait 90 days, promising to deliver the letter after the financing closed. She agreed reluctantly, partly because she feared Benjamin's reaction, and partly because another adult had validated the avoidance she already wanted. Daniel's wife experienced a severe medical crisis. The acquisition became hostile, and 3 months passed inside emergencies he kept calling temporary. When he reopened the file, Amara had relocated, Benjamin had changed apartments, and Daniel feared admitting the delay would expose both his betrayal and the company's unlawful handling of private correspondence. He buried the first letter, allowed the system to capture later messages, and convinced himself that Amara's silence meant she had chosen a safer life without Benjamin. 6 years later, Daniel found the courier receipt during an office move and located Amara's nonprofit through public records. He saw photographs of Noah appearing healthy, loved, and secure, then used that evidence to excuse another act of cowardice. Daniel repeatedly planned to confess, yet every successful quarter made the truth feel more destructive, because he had built his career around being the person Benjamin trusted most. The flash drive contained Amara's recording of their private meeting, documenting Daniel's promise to deliver the letter after 90 days. Her younger voice also admitted that she was accepting the delay because part of her wanted someone else to authorize the silence she had already chosen. The recording ended with Daniel assuring her that no father should discover his child through a security investigation. In the silence afterward, Benjamin realized the cruelest truth was not that one person had deceived him, but that several frightened adults had controlled his choices while believing control could be mistaken for protection. Rachel entered before Benjamin decided what should happen next, informing them that Amara's blood pressure had changed and surgery could no longer be delayed. Benjamin left Daniel beside the evidence and reached the preparation room as nurses began moving Amara toward the operating theater. He told her the messages had been intercepted, Daniel had confessed, and no single explanation could carry all the blame. Amara closed her eyes with visible pain, not from surprise but from confirmation of something she had long suspected. Benjamin took her hand and said they would discuss anger, custody, apologies, and lost years only after she returned. She asked whether Noah knew enough to understand, and Benjamin answered that he knew nobody had abandoned him deliberately, although several adults had failed him through fear. As the doors opened, Amara squeezed Benjamin's fingers and said the most important question was no longer who deserved punishment, but whether they could stop making Noah inherit consequences created before he could speak. The operating room doors closed, leaving Benjamin in a corridor where money, influence, and certainty possessed no authority over the next several hours. Noah sat beside him with the wooden bridge across his knees, watching the doors without asking for guarantees no honest adult could provide. Benjamin explained that the surgeons were experienced, the condition had been identified in time, and fear did not mean something terrible would happen. Noah asked whether Benjamin was frightened, and Benjamin admitted that he was, resisting the instinct to protect the boy with confidence he did not feel. They discussed Amara's emergency preparations, including labeled meals, school contacts, medication instructions, and directions for watering the small evergreen tree beside her apartment window. Noah revealed that she packed a suitcase for him 3 weeks earlier, saying he might stay with Aunt Lena if medical testing required a short visit. She had not mentioned Benjamin until the previous night, because she wanted their first meeting to belong to truth rather than expectation. Benjamin asked what Noah wanted, and the boy studied the bridge before answering that he wanted his mother to wake up before adults began rearranging his life. The simplicity of that request exposed how quickly Benjamin had begun thinking in terms of custody, rights, and lost time instead of the child's immediate reality. He apologized, explaining that solving problems too quickly was a habit he had once mistaken for love. Noah said his mother often did the opposite, waiting so long to avoid hurting people that silence created a larger injury. Neither observation turned one parent into the better person, which gave Benjamin an unexpected sense of relief. He could not recover 8 birthdays by becoming perfect during one hospital morning. And Noah did not need a wealthy father arriving as a hero. He needed an adult willing to remain after the dramatic revelation became ordinary responsibility. Daniel waited across the lounge until Benjamin invited him closer, although the invitation did not signal forgiveness or restored trust. He offered to resign immediately, surrender evidence to the board, and accept any legal consequences resulting from the intercepted communications. Benjamin said resignation would be necessary, but public humiliation would not restore Noah's childhood or improve Amara's recovery. Daniel would cooperate with an independent investigation, disclose every withheld message, and help dismantle the executive system that encouraged employees to treat personal vulnerability as a corporate threat. Daniel agreed, then asked whether Benjamin wanted him to leave the hospital. Noah answered before Benjamin could speak, saying his mother believed people should remain present when consequences arrived, unless their presence caused greater harm. Daniel accepted the judgment from the child whose life he had altered, moved to a distant chair, and began writing a complete account without asking anyone to comfort him. Emily delivered archived policy documents showing that Benjamin had approved the original security protocol during the acquisition crisis without reading the section permitting senior executives to delay personal communications indefinitely. His signature did not equal Daniel's concealment, yet it destroyed the comforting belief that the system had betrayed Benjamin without his participation. He had rewarded Daniel for eliminating distractions, praised employees who protected his concentration, and created a culture where access to him became more valuable than honesty with him. Amara's letters disappeared because one man made a cowardly decision, but they remained buried because Benjamin built a life in which nobody wanted to interrupt success with human complexity. He remembered Amara asking whether he would recognize a life worth keeping before it disappeared, and finally understood she had not demanded less ambition. She had been asking whether he could remain emotionally reachable while pursuing it. 4 hours after surgery began, Dr. Harris entered with fatigue visible above his mask, and Noah stood so quickly that the bridge slipped from his knees. Benjamin caught it before it struck the floor, then held Noah's shoulder while the doctor explained that the repair had been successful. Amara experienced unexpected bleeding, but the team controlled it without lasting damage, and she was stable in recovery. Noah covered his face with both hands before leaning against Benjamin, who did not mistake the gesture for instant acceptance or inherited affection. The boy simply needed support, and Benjamin remained still enough to provide it. Daniel turned away while wiping his eyes, understanding that relief did not erase his place in the story. Dr. Harris warned that Amara would require months of reduced activity, reliable assistance, and careful monitoring, which transformed every future decision from symbolism into responsibility. Amara regained consciousness near evening, although medication left her tired and unable to sustain a long conversation. Noah entered first, placed the repaired bridge beside her bed, and announced that everyone had finally told the truth without destroying the hospital. Benjamin remained near the doorway until she motioned him closer, then reported that Daniel would resign, and an independent review would examine the communication system. Amara asked whether Benjamin planned to convert guilt into a large donation, a new foundation, or an impossible promise designed to repair everything before morning. He admitted that all three ideas had occurred to him, which drew a faint laugh from her. She said the neighborhood projects needed funding, but money must never become payment for access to Noah or forgiveness from her. Benjamin agreed, then asked permission to begin with something smaller and more difficult, appearing when invited, listening when uncomfortable, and allowing both of them to decide his place gradually. Several days later, Amara returned to a modest brownstone apartment above the office of her neighborhood development organization. Benjamin attended Noah's school presentation without announcing his identity, brought groceries selected from Amara's list, and learned that Noah disliked mushrooms but ate them when trying to appear polite. Amara observed these efforts carefully, neither rejecting them nor presenting them as proof that trust had been restored. She required Benjamin to complete a legal paternity test, not because she doubted biology, but because Noah deserved facts protected from future conflict. When the results confirmed Benjamin as his father, he did not celebrate as though winning a claim. He asked Noah whether they could begin meeting twice each week, and the boy answered that beginnings worked better when nobody pretended they were reunions. The first months demanded more patience than any dramatic reconciliation could have shown, because relationships were built through ordinary choices repeated after the cameras, apologies, and emergencies disappeared. Benjamin learned to leave board meetings before Noah's tutoring sessions. Although the first time he arrived early, Noah assumed something important had been canceled. Amara returned gradually to work while attending cardiac rehabilitation, and she accepted Benjamin's help only after they created written boundaries separating parenting, financial support, and unresolved romantic history. Benjamin established a trust for Noah under joint supervision, then funded Amara's housing projects through an independent foundation whose board included community residents instead of Sullivan executives. The structure frustrated him because it prevented him from controlling outcomes, which was precisely why Amara considered it necessary. When he asked whether she believed generosity could become manipulation, she answered that good intentions still required guardrails whenever power remained unequal. Daniel's investigation uncovered 17 delayed personal communications involving executives, employees, and family members, although none carried consequences as severe as Amara's letters. Sullivan Technologies publicly acknowledged the policy failure, compensated affected employees, and created an ethics office independent from senior leadership. Daniel resigned, forfeited his annual bonus, and accepted a civil settlement related to privacy violations. But Benjamin refused to present him publicly as the sole cause. During a company address, Benjamin admitted that he had built systems rewarding uninterrupted performance while treating emotional needs as inefficiencies. Investors criticized the statement as unnecessary self-exposure, yet employees responded by sharing stories about medical emergencies, divorces, and family crises concealed from managers because vulnerability seemed professionally dangerous. The company's value declined temporarily, then stabilized as the reforms improved retention and trust. Benjamin discovered that leadership became less impressive when practiced honestly, but far more useful. Noah remained cautious through every change, especially when classmates discovered his father's identity after a photograph appeared online. Reporters surrounded the school one afternoon, asking whether Benjamin had abandoned him, whether Amara wanted money, and whether the family planned a Christmas wedding. Benjamin's security team cleared the sidewalk, but Noah refused to enter the waiting vehicle until Amara arrived. That evening, he accused both parents of claiming truth would make life simpler when it had actually made strangers feel entitled to their pain. Amara apologized for underestimating the attention, while Benjamin admitted that his public life imposed consequences Noah had never chosen. Together, they allowed Noah to decide what could be disclosed, removed his name from company announcements, and pursued legal protection against photographers near the school. The crisis became the first major decision they made, as equal parents rather than guilty adults competing to repair the past. Benjamin and Amara also confronted the part of their history no policy reform could resolve. He resented that she agreed to Daniel's 90-day delay, while she resented that his former life made gatekeepers appear more reachable than Benjamin himself. During one counseling session, Benjamin said he could forgive fear more easily than the years she continued choosing silence after receiving no reply. Amara answered that shame did not feel like a choice while living inside it. But she understood explanation could not become absolution. She had watched Benjamin's success and believed each achievement proved he was better without the burdens she represented. Benjamin told her that assumption reduced him to ambition just as surely as investors reduced him to profit. Their reconciliation began only after both accepted that love had existed alongside immaturity, devotion alongside control, and good intentions alongside harm. Near the following Christmas, Noah asked whether Benjamin still possessed the ring he had intended to give Amara 8 years earlier. Benjamin admitted that he kept it in a locked drawer, but no longer considered it a promise waiting to be completed. The ring belonged to two younger people who believed marriage could preserve love without teaching them how to communicate honestly. Noah asked whether that meant Benjamin no longer loved his mother, and Benjamin replied that love had become more serious because it no longer demanded an immediate reward. He loved Amara enough to respect her recovery, independence, anger, and right to choose a future untouched by his guilt. Noah considered the answer, then said adults made simple feelings sound unnecessarily complicated. Benjamin laughed because the criticism was fair. Amara's nonprofit prepared to open Harbor House, a renovated apartment building for families leaving temporary shelters, using a model combining affordable housing, childcare, and employment counseling. The project began before her surgery, but nearly collapsed when construction costs rose and a private lender withdrew. Benjamin could have replaced the funding privately within an hour, yet Amara asked him to help negotiate a coalition among local banks, city programs, and community investors. The process required months, public hearings, and compromises neither of them controlled, but the final structure allowed Harbor House to operate without dependence on one donor. During the opening ceremony, Amara credited residents who designed the services, refusing to turn Benjamin's involvement into a redemption story centered on wealth. Benjamin stood beside Noah in the audience and felt proud without requiring recognition. He finally understood why Amara believed the happiest things they built together were never made of glass or steel. After the ceremony, Daniel approached them for the first time since the investigation concluded. He looked older, having spent the year consulting for nonprofit ethics organizations while completing the terms of his settlement. He apologized directly to Noah without describing himself as confused, protective, or trapped by circumstances. Noah asked why Daniel failed to confess after realizing the letters involved a child, and Daniel answered that cowardice often survived by changing its name every morning. One day he called it timing, another loyalty, then privacy, caution, or concern for everyone involved. By the time he admitted the truth, he had built a career around being the person Benjamin trusted most. Noah did not offer forgiveness, but he thanked Daniel for answering without asking to be comforted. Amara later said, "Consequence was sometimes more humane than permanent condemnation because it required people to live differently rather than merely suffer." On Christmas morning, 1 year after the hospital call, Benjamin woke in the guest room of Amara's apartment because snow had closed several bridges after a late family dinner. He heard Noah moving through the kitchen, attempting to prepare pancakes without waking anyone, and found flour covering the counter like evidence from an unsuccessful experiment. Amara entered wearing the red scarf she had knitted during the weeks before surgery, then leaned against the doorway while Benjamin negotiated with Noah over whether smoke alarms counted as cooking assistance. Nothing about the morning resembled the silent luxury of Benjamin's former Christmas routine, yet he felt no need to preserve it as a perfect scene. Amara still attended medical appointments. Noah still sometimes called him Benjamin instead of Dad, and unresolved grief appeared during moments none of them could predict. Their life had become meaningful precisely because nobody pretended healing had erased the damage. After breakfast, Noah gave each of them a small wooden object wrapped in newspaper from Harbor House's opening day. Benjamin received the repaired bridge, now reinforced with fitted braces, instead of the paperclip Noah once used as a temporary solution. Amara received a matching bridge with one side intentionally unfinished, and Noah explained that hers represented choices nobody else could complete for her. He had carved a sentence beneath Benjamin's bridge, stating that strength meant allowing weight to be shared. Under Amara's, he had written that protection without trust could become another kind of wall. Both adults laughed through tears, while Noah complained that their emotional reactions were delaying the remaining presence. Benjamin realized the boy had not forgotten what happened, but he had learned that memory could become guidance instead of inheritance. Later that morning, Benjamin drove them to Sullivan Technologies, where the annual charity event had been redesigned as a community partnership meeting, without celebrity speeches or stage donations. Formerly homeless families from Harbor House presented employment proposals, children demonstrated neighborhood design projects, and employees volunteered through year-long programs rather than holiday publicity. Benjamin no longer opened the event alone from a stage. He sat among organizers, while Amara moderated a discussion about housing, technology access, and the difference between helping communities and controlling them. When reporters asked whether the program represented his attempt to repair a personal scandal, Benjamin said repair mattered only when the people affected determined what improvement looked like. He redirected attention toward the residents leading each project, accepting that meaningful leadership sometimes required becoming less central to the story. Noah watched from the front row, no longer seeing his father as a stranger or hero, but as a man learning to remain reachable. Daniel attended quietly, after receiving an invitation from Noah rather than Benjamin. The company's ethics office had asked him to speak anonymously during training sessions about how protective systems became harmful when nobody challenged their assumptions. His participation did not restore his position, erase legal consequences, or require Benjamin to recover their former friendship. It allowed experience purchased through failure to prevent similar harm, which Amara considered more useful than permanent exile. After the meeting, Daniel gave Benjamin the original first letter he had withheld 8 years earlier, preserved inside the investigation archive. Benjamin asked why it had not been returned sooner, and Daniel explained that Amara believed the letter should be offered only when Benjamin could read it, without turning pain into evidence against every person involved. Benjamin accepted the envelope but waited until they returned home. That evening, the three of them sat beside a modest tree, decorated with handmade ornaments, collected throughout Amara and Noah's life. Benjamin opened the letter while Amara remained beside him, no longer allowing written words to replace a conversation they were capable of having together. The younger Amara described her pregnancy, her father's illness, Lena's dependence, and her fear that Benjamin would sacrifice everything before understanding what fatherhood demanded. She also admitted that she wanted him to prove her fears wrong without giving him enough truth to do so, an expectation she recognized as unfair even while writing. Near the end, she asked him not to search for one villain if the letter reached him too late, because harm could emerge from frightened people cooperating with systems that rewarded silence. Benjamin folded the pages carefully and said the woman who wrote them had been brave enough to understand her mistake, but not yet brave enough to remain present. Amara agreed, and neither of them used forgiveness to erase accountability. She then asked what Benjamin intended to do with the ring still resting in his apartment drawer. Benjamin removed the velvet box from his coat, revealing that he had brought it without deciding whether to open it. He told her he would never offer it as compensation for lost years, a shortcut into family, or proof that love had survived unchanged. The ring represented a proposal designed before either of them understood the difference between devotion and partnership. He asked whether she would allow him to sell it and use the money to establish an emergency childcare fund managed by Harbor House residents. Amara smiled, then reminded him that she had always believed expensive gifts should become useful memories whenever possible. Noah approved immediately, although he requested permission to keep the empty box for bridge parts. Benjamin then placed a plain brass key in Amara's hand, attached to a tag bearing the address of a storefront beside Harbor House. He explained that the neighborhood coalition approved the location as a permanent design studio where residents could develop housing proposals, youth projects, and public spaces. The lease belonged to the nonprofit, not Benjamin, and every financial condition had been reviewed by its independent board. He was not asking her to enter his life, move into his home, or accept a future he had already planned. He was asking whether they could continue building something whose shape neither of them controlled alone. Amara closed her fingers around the key and said she would consider partnership, but only if he learned to attend community meetings without reorganizing the agenda. Benjamin answered that he would fail occasionally, listen when corrected, and return the following week. Several months later, they married in the garden where their first photograph had been taken, surrounded by residents, employees, relatives, and children who had planted new trees across the neighborhood. The ceremony contained no television crews, corporate announcements, or promises about never causing pain again. Benjamin promised to remain reachable when life became inconvenient, while Amara promised not to confuse carrying pain alone with protecting the people she loved. Noah carried both rings across the wooden bridge he had repaired, now displayed above a narrow stream running through the garden. When the officiant asked who supported the marriage, Noah said support was not permission, but a responsibility everyone present would have to keep practicing. The guests laughed, Amara cried, and Benjamin understood that a happy ending was not a reward delivered after suffering. It was the decision to build honestly after discovering how easily love could be damaged by silence.